Good morning and welcome to Unusual Activity powered by FinancialJuice.com with George Avedon and Milton Marmonides. Thank you for joining us this 20th of January 2015. Certainly lots happening from over the weekend. Last week, of course, the Swiss National Bank action sent everything into a spin. Markets, currency markets, um, uh, commodity markets, and equities. Of course, we're seeing uh, S&P futures this morning higher by 5.75 handles at 2018.75. We'll get into the technicals in just a few minutes here. Crude oil, West Texas Intermediate crude, back down to the 47 handle, $47 2 pennies this morning, down $2.11. We have gold on a tear recently. We've been reporting that certainly from a technical perspective, going through that 1200 level was a support. Going through the 1250 was a significant action, and continuing through that. And again, we'll have Milton comment on that in a few moments. We have the 10-year at 1.793. So again, maintaining that below 2% range. 30-year 2.403. Maintaining that really now below the 2.5 level on the 30-year, and rather impressive there. Also, the dollar at 92.698. Higher by 0.178. One of the central themes that we'll discuss in a few moments that's continuing on this morning. And certainly the euro also actually slightly positive as well this morning at 1.1599. Higher by 0.0009. One of the main things that we just want to bring up in central themes that are continuing this morning, and that is, although we have certainly today is a little bit of a interesting day where the euro and the dollar are both trading a bit higher this morning, certainly, but the trend has been a euro that is weaker, strong dollar. We have had continued oil weakness, and certainly something that we are keeping an eye on very closely. Commentary and action, of course, is the ECB meeting on the 22nd. This notion of deflationary risk, we'll get into that in a moment. And certainly the rates, the treasuries yields in the U.S. specifically are very, very low, and so that's something that we are keeping an eye on. Certainly just a carryover through the Swiss National Bank reducing its interest rates. So what we'd like to do now, we'd like to jump immediately into the technicals that we are seeing this morning. Milt, let's jump into the technicals. What are you seeing this morning? Certainly, at least it looks like a positive start to the to trading. What's on your mind as you're heading into this morning?
Well, this morning, though, we're going to keep an eye on, a lot of news over the weekend. You had J.P. Morgan come out with a saying that oil could break below 40 short term. You had the IMF cutting, expectations across the board on all world economies. You had some Greek news again over the weekend with Merkel and the Syriza party gaining momentum. You had Morgan Stanley come out this morning and miss. That's 6 out of 6 on the financials. Johnson & Johnson came out lower on the revenue side. That's another miss. But the markets are trading up. So we're going to see what happens today. Oil down under the 4% this morning. Futures are up about 0.25%. off the highs of pre-market. We're going to keep an eye on that, keeping an eye on levels, watching the action throughout today. We have ECB this week. That's what everyone is going to be talking about. ECB on Thursday. You have the State of the Union address tonight, which could be also market moving on specific names. We threw out a list of possible topics on the UA, so we keep an eye on those. We'll give a breakdown of a few names later this afternoon. Let me just jump on a few texts real quick. The ES markets. We're looking at ES right now at 2020, currently at support from this morning's highs. We're looking at the upside resistance around 2025 to 2027. Basically hit that this morning, sold off that to 2020 support. The next level above 2025, 27 is the 2036, 38 level. Support looking at that 2020 to the next level 2015, 2017. Ideal that 2000 number is a number to watch to the up and downside. So we're keeping an eye on that level. Oil. What are we going to say about oil? Had a move on Friday. Gave it all back basically today. Down over 4% this morning. It broke the downtrend. Currently, that 44.20 number is the low. If it breaks that low, it's an extended downtrend. Typical formation of what happened last time in the 50s levels. That brought us down to 44. If that 44.20 is broken, you could possibly see the 30 handles. We're watching that level. We're watching the oil. We're watching the volume. Keep an eye on that downtrend. VIX currently at resistance, 2021. Watching that level, seeing if it can continue on the upside, or will it base around this point. We will continue watching the VIX. An upside move could see a nice break above the resistance. That could see a downside move in the markets. We're watching those levels carefully and closely. Gold broke above the 1250 resistance we mentioned for a while. Currently trading at 1287, up $10 this morning. 1300 is the resistance level. If that 1300 number is broken, could easily see 1350. We're watching it. We're watching it on volume, keeping an eye on the 1250 downside support to the 1300 upside resistance. Lastly, currencies. Right now, in my opinion, it seems like it's a currency battle going on. You had Denmark cutting rates, Turkey cutting rates, ECB coming out now with possibly QE on Thursday. The U.S. dollar is as strong as ever. Clearly, it's something going on the currency side of the markets. What it is, who really knows? But as of now, a strong U.S. dollar is somewhat times a negative on U.S. companies. So we're going to keep an eye on that, keeping an eye throughout the week on any other currency, quote-unquote, manips. So we're going to keep an eye on everything, keeping an eye on what's going on with the U.S. dollar in regards to oil, in regards to markets, in regards to earnings. So that's basically a quick gist of the technical analysis for the pre-market. Markets open in about 7 minutes. I'll just pass it back to George.
Thank you, Milton. So again, one of the central themes that we've been discussing in the last several weeks, if those of you have been listening, certainly, is the strength in the U.S. dollar. And so what we have here is a chart. We pulled up this is a 10-year chart on a weekly basis. So we'll zero in on, for example, in 2014, even in the last, I would say, since October time, since that low in late June, early July, the U.S. dollar has just been on a tear. And that is eventually, if it's already hasn't, certainly going to have an effect, as Milton said, on understanding how U.S. companies that do businesses over, internationally, in earnings time. So I think that's something that we are monitoring rather closely. We'll also pull up an E-mini future on the euro, and you can see as well a continued downtrend in the euro, certainly compared to the U.S. dollar. So that's something that, again, we want to watch rather closely, especially with the ECB announcement and meeting 2 days from now, the 22nd. as information comes out, we'll see how that influence specifically the currency markets here, folks. And so that's the really larger story here. So let's turn back to the presentation here. We have for you the language behind the technicals here. What we'd like to do as well, like to get into some of the central themes that we are seeing this morning, and that is, as Milton says, certainly we're continuing on with the deflation risk. Is this a race down to the bottom, folks? We've seen, as Milton said, this announcements from the IMF. We have rate reductions from several central banks over the weekend. We have what we try to pick up on is this notion of sentiment, and sentiment can change rather quickly, and this is something that we have our ears to the ground to very closely, and specifically on deflation risk. We've been discussing deflation risk. We were a bit out in front when folks were discussing that inflation was not hitting specific targets. Maybe there's a lower inflation expectation. Certainly, the central banks would like 2% as the goal for inflation. Certainly, we're not reaching that anywhere. Well, certainly China, but in terms of deflation, that has entered the lexicon of central bankers. Some deny it, of course. That's fine. But that's something that we'll continue to keep an eye on rather closely. Certainly, keeping an eye on the Grexit. Will something develop out of that? The Greek exit out of the euro. Is there a risk of contagion? Also, we had economic news out of China. We'd like to go into that just momentarily. So again, in China, so we had industrial production and retail sales both beating median estimates. December GDP reading of 7.3 through December estimated was 7.2. According to analysts, GDP is still on track for 7.4. Now we know we had some World Bank lowering of GDP consensus for China down to 7%. So again, we'll continue to monitor that as we get into today's trading day and the rest of the week. Certainly, the continuing story here, folks, is oil. As Milton mentioned, J.P. Morgan commenting that $40 oil or below certainly is a possibility. We did have yesterday, certainly U.S. markets were closed yesterday, but we did have oil, at least initially, trading near that 50 level early yesterday. So one of the main things with oil certainly is how countries respond to the lower oil prices, specifically OPEC, non-OPEC nations, Russia, Venezuela. We saw last week that Venezuela attempted to influence the OPEC oil ministers to no avail. And so that's an interesting story there. So again, we're just about a little over a minute for the open in New York. In terms of geopolitical perspective, should something come out of the Russia-Ukraine situation or the Middle East, we'll certainly let you know. It seems as though from a sentiment perspective, we have a market that has internalized geopolitical events to the point where, should something happen, not much reaction occurs within the greater markets, the macroeconomic indicators, short of any exogenous events. We did have, so let's get into some of the macroeconomic news here. Baltic Dry Index rises 1.9% to 753 points. This is the first time we've had the Baltic Dry Index rise in quite a while, so that's something that we want to see how that turns out. Again, it's a great index to watch. It tends to be a leading indicator with respect to economic activity, specifically raw materials, grains, shipping. So again, very interesting index to watch. We do have the markets open in New York. Fed watcher Stephen Beckner says Federal Reserve officials contemplate if a lower neutral interest rate would mean a lower federal funds rate. So we have some nuances behind, excuse me, we have some nuances behind whether or not the Fed will raise rates, what's the target rate, and I think that will continue until we actually get some kind of definitive information out of the Fed with respect to rates. Certainly, the Treasury is indicating that not much interest rate rise, specifically on the Treasuries. A big bid on both the 5, 10, and 30-year rates, but again, something to keep an eye on. Housing market index, we have numbers coming out at 10. Jerome Powell speaking at 10, and we have a few Treasury auction results throughout the day. So one of the things we look for in Fed speakers, for example, in Powell, will there be any commentary with respect to monetary policy, rate rises, indication of any commentary in terms of world economic, quote-unquote, should there be woes, and their perspective on that. So again, we haven't really seen much out of the Fed in terms of commentary with respect to global economic activity, and that's we'll see if that ever begins to enter the lexicon of the Fed folks. So continuing for 2015 theme, certainly the last two there, certainly macroeconomic currency wars. We feel that the larger story here is currency. Certainly, we've seen the action from the Swiss National Bank last week. We're going to still see ramifications of that for quite some time to come based on that particular action. So let's take a look at overnight markets. Let's start off with Asia. We had let's take a look at Asia here. We had the Nikkei higher by 2.07%, the Hang Seng higher by 0.90%, the Shanghai higher by 1.82%. So also in Europe, let's see where we are on the European continent. FTSE 0.64% to the upside, DAX higher by 0.20%, IBEX higher by 1.49%, CAC and Paris higher by 1.33%. So continuing certainly strength we have in the U.S. Currently now S&P futures higher by 10.25 at 2023.25. So certainly strength continuing at least in the U.S. initially on the initial market open. So let's get into what we have here are some oil ETFs and names. And these are something that we watch at least on a kind of a mock portfolio, if you will, not specific shares, but really taking a look at how these particular entities move with respect to oil, what's the correlation, and certainly for traders that are not specifically trading oils, but certainly if it's oil names like ETFs, ETNs, 2 times, 3 times weakness, 2 times, 3 times volatility, and perhaps some of the larger and smaller oil names, specifically in the equities. What's the correlation with oil? If oil goes up 1%, what's that move in that in specific securities or ETNs? And of course, with oil continuing its downside or negative feel, what's that impact on producers? What's the longer term impact on producers? What's the impact on CPI and PPI data? Remember, it does impact inflation to the downside. So if the Fed and other central bankers are looking for a higher inflation rate to battle against deflation, how will this impact from a very larger scale perspective? So let's dive into commodities, energy, and raw materials. We have again crude oil lower by 2.06, $2.05 at $47.09. On the distillates, gasoline lower by 0.0269 at 1.3319. Natural gas lower by 0.195 at 2.935. Again, that was the other story that we've been monitoring here, is the natural gas at that 3 level. Seems to be a little bit of an attraction to that 3 level. Heating oil lower by 0.0362 at 1.6294. Gold higher by $10.10 at $1,287. Even certainly continuing that up move towards the 1300 level, as Milton said, continuing to watch that. Silver above that, maintaining above that $17 level, higher by 0.04, 4 cents at $17.79. We have, let's get into cocoa, higher by $5 at $29.47. On the treasuries, we have the 5-year at 1.275, quite a bit below. We're just around that 40 basis points below. Remember, we were at 1.662 level some weeks back. 10-year 1.800, 30-year 2.406. And let's take a check on the dollar. We have 92.795. We did have a little bit of a tick up here just moments ago here, and currently at 92.802, maintaining that strength in the U.S. dollar. Now euro weakness at 1.1586. So we did have something coming out of Russia this morning on the wires. Russian President Putin, armed forces to be bolstered further. Russia to protect sovereignty, integrity. We'll see if that has an impact on the overall markets. Remember, Putin does tend to be, almost have to take him with a little bit of grain of salt, likes to go out there, likes to make statements. We'll see actually what happens on the larger scale and how the world reacts to that. So let's get into specific securities this morning. So we'll take a look at insider transactions. This morning we had Fund, F-U-N-D, Rolls-Royce Trust Incorporated. We had a 10% owner purchasing 113,000 shares. FUND currently at, it was indicating at $7.21. We had FPRX, 5 Prime Therapeutics, currently at $26 in a nickel. We had $250,000 purchase by a 10% owner, and again, currently at $26.19. On CD, I'm sorry, yes. So we did have a director purchase, a little bit over $250,000 worth on FPRX. CDNA, currently indicating at $7.10. Again, at about a $250,000 purchase by a 10% owner. JP Morgan, we had a director purchase about a $500,000 worth, currently at $56.03. AFAM, Bear with us one moment. Slight delay on these charts here, folks. AFAM Almost Family, we're currently indicating at $30.87, about a $210,000 purchase by a 10% owner in AFAM. XOXO, we had currently $17.59. We had the president purchasing $50,000 worth, again, currently at $17.59. EHTH, eHealth currently trading at $10.58 this morning on a little bit of a pop in volume. We had a $20 million purchase, 1 million shares of a 10% group, 10% owner, currently at $10.58, higher by 9.5% this morning on eHealth. VISI, Volt Information Sciences, we have currently indicating at $11.18 this morning. We had a $61,000 purchase by a 10% owner. Also OPK, we've seen this before, folks. We had the CEO purchase about $250,000 worth, currently at $10.02, flat on the day. So let's get into the morning syndicates. We have DRAD, and again, folks, morning syndicates are offering secondaries. They tend to be dilutive, meaning there's more shares available, and they tend to be a dilutive effect for the particular stock price. We'll take a look at how these particular morning syndicates respond. We had DRAD files $20 million mixed security shelf, currently at $4.10. So a little bit of an impact, lower by 1.2% this morning. FULL, we currently are at $4.78. Registered 28.2 million in rights offerings. GLW, we had currently indicating trading at $23.27. That's Corning. Automatic mixed shelf. For those of you who are new to morning syndicates, automatic mixed shelves are a combination. It can be a combination of anything from equities, common, preferreds, convertibles, various other entities, including fixed income. So Corning currently at $23.25. KIN. Kindred Biosciences at $6.98 this morning. We had $150 million mixed shelf, lower this morning. NYLD, NRG yield, let's see, currently at $52.76, lower by about 0.75%. Automatic shelf for 9.5 million shares related to convertible notes. OMER, automatic mixed shelf, currently at $23.70, again lower by 0.35%. And SCMP, we have Sucumpo Pharmaceuticals currently at $14.48 this morning, higher by $3. Higher by 3.1%. So again, interesting how we see the in trading how participants, traders, analysts view particular morning syndicates, and those are the morning syndicates for the morning. So what we'd like to get into is a recap of where we are this morning on in our markets. We have S&P futures higher by now 1 now, so a bit of a sentiment reversal, if you will, at least for the morning. Currently at 2014, up by 1, so really near flat. We did have a considerable downturn in just early morning trading. Also, we have crude oil lower by $2.27 at $46.84. We did have DXY currently still higher by 0.211 at 92.6 1.731 and the 10-year at 1.786. So certainly, folks, interesting dynamics taking place this morning. A little bit of a reversal in sentiment on the grander scale on the macro indices. We'll continue to watch that as we get into the trading day. We thank you for joining us on Unusual Activity, powered by FinancialJuice.com, with George Avedon and Milton Romanides. Wish you a great